And so the bondage that we want to talk to you tonight is about mental bondage. And that is when you allow some experience that you have had to hold you captive and to make you a slave. Amen, Don McKay? Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yes.
And so I spoke to a friend who has a friend who is struggling with the fact that after losing her mom, she found out that the man that she thought was her father was not her father. And so many of us,
After mom passed, she found out.
after mom passed, so many of us can relate to
Yeah.
he's not the father, he ain't the baby's daddy, he is the baby's daddy, he might be the baby's daddy, you know, and they said it years ago, papa's maybe, mama's baby, papa's maybe.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
And so when we think about mental bondage and life's situations and just looking at the community as a whole, we can agree that our community is suffering from sort of the breakup of the family structure. And many of us, whether we admit it or not, really do long for love from a parent, from moms and dads and those sorts of things. So I'm going to let Linnell start off tonight. I'm going to ask her a couple of questions. And so what our topic is, again, is that he's still my father. And Linnell has a situation that may or may not be unique. It depends how you see it. Where she herself found out that the man that raised her was not her biological father. However, by the time she found that out, she was in college?
I was in college.
She was in
Yes.
college. And so I'm going to let her talk a little bit about it. But one of the things, and this is where I want to start, is that one of the things with the gentleman that was, we're going to say he's still her father, because he was not her father biologically, but he was her father. And she had a very unique experience, I believe, because she said he never treated her differently. And that doesn't happen all the time. I think sometimes, men may have a inkling or a clue, and they don't treat you the same. But Linnell was a little blessed. So just give us a very quick snippet of your family structure.
Okay,
There
so-
is,
So my family structure was my mom and dad, and then there were four of us girls, and we lived in our home, and I was treated no differently than anyone else. And the one thing was I looked a little different. Like my hair was a little different. I was lighter skinned. They all looked very much alike, but I still had some of the features that they had, so it wasn't
Yes.
completely off. So we, would hear little things, and I remember one time when I was young, a girl in my neighborhood said, "My mom told me that, your father is not, Paul Medley's not your father." Well, when I went home and said that to my mother said, "Your father is the man that takes care of you and puts food on the table every day."
yeah.
Right? So that's how I was raised, right? I was raised to believe that, and it wasn't until I was in college that I was that I actually became aware that my father was in fact the person that this young girl had said years ago. It was that person. I knew him because he was a very close friend of my family. So he wasn't foreign to my family. He was very close to my family. So when I later found out, pieces started to fall into place then.
Sure. So let's just go back to 1 second. So you've got this family structure. You've got a mom and a dad. And you've got four girls. So they have a typical family structure, right?
Yeah.
But Linnell is next to the baby. So one of the things that you said that I think is key, and we can all relate to in some way, shape, fashion, or form, is that there was something a little different about your features. So there was something different,
Sure.
but not major, right?
In my mother's family, they had a lighter complexion, so I looked like it could have been just
Right.
that I looked more
Skip
like
the
her
generation.
family. Correct.
Right. So, but then your mother says, so then, we always had these little kids that's chitter-chatting out on the school court or the playground, right? There's the lesson that we need to be careful what we say in front of children, right? Because the kids act like they're not listening to us, but what are they doing?
Absorbing everything.
They're absorbing
Yeah.
everything,
And
they're
repeating it.
and repeating it, and even going to mimic behavior, because that's when we get into those who may believe in generational curses. It comes from repeating the same behavior, right? So little girl, probably the same little girl that ran around told people that Santa Claus wasn't real was the little girl that said, he's not your father. But your mother tells you something that's very important. And that is, your father is the man that puts the food on the table.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people to hear, because we could get caught up in the biological father, right? And there are many times that kids are in blended families, right? Blended generations. And we have parents that want to say, well, don't touch my child, or don't say this to my child. Or we have kids that feel like they have the right to tell the person that puts the food on the table, you're not my father. But your mother gives you that good information, right? So he's your father. And so some years goes by, and then what happens?
So it was in my senior year in my freshman year in college, I received from my biological father 19 long stem roses for my birthday. And then he sent me a note that said that he was coming up to take me out to dinner. And so that night he did. He came up, take me out to dinner. I had a wonderful evening. But I mean, I knew him as my uncle. That's how we referenced him. And nothing was stated to me then. I remember it being a little odd, and I remember even telling my mother about it. And, she just said, that's nice, and that was the end of that.
Right.
And it wasn't until my senior year in college, my mother was very sick at the time. And I had gone back to school after Christmas break. But over Christmas break, she started to tell me this, she's sitting in the living room with just the two of us, and she's telling me how what you do in the dark will come out in the light. And as soon as she says that, somebody came in the house, and we never got back to our conversation, and I had to go back to school. And she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I went back to college, and then not long after I had gotten back there, I don't even know how long I was there, but all I know is I wound up coming back. My sister came to get me, had to rush back home, and she was doing really, really poorly. She had taken a turn for the worse. And by the time I got there, it just was not the time to talk about that stuff. She was in the hospital. So it wasn't that time.
So you never got a chance to discuss it with your mom?
Not with my mother. Now, what I learned was that my biological father had been coming to the hospital to see her. And I never saw him there, but I was in school, but I don't know if my family members ever saw him there, but he actually was going up to visit my mom, and she told him about my tuition bill that I had left over for school. And so it was after my mom passed that he said, your mom told me you have a bill left. And so he said, she asked me to take care of it, so I'm going to take care of it. And he did. He came and gave me like more than $7,000 so I could pay for the rest of my college to get out.
So you were fortunate. You had an opportunity to get to know this gentleman over time.
Oh yeah, we knew him well. But I mean, he treated all the kids in the neighborhood, right? He just was, everybody knew if Mr. Herbert was at the store, you could, all the kids went and they bought, they got anything they would want in the store.
So I want to bring Diamond K in. He's sitting here with this serious face. Just cut up like you do, on your other shows. I want to bring him in.
As soon as a moment presents itself, I will.
I know it's too serious. We got to lighten up the mood. Yeah. It's a little warm for me. So Diamond K is here because he has had an experience on the other side of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
On his side of the spectrum, he wrote a book. And next week when we come back, we're going to really focus on his angle. And his topic of discussion will be...
What?
I Am Not the Father. Isn't that the title of the book?
Yeah, that is the title of the book, yeah.
Right? So that would be your...
I mean, that's, so my story is a little different. I've never heard a story like that, which was good. But so my story is from the standpoint of of being the person who did not know that the child was not mine. So that's what.
So you're gonna tell more of your story next week.
Whenever
so
you're
tell all
ready.
this week. So
Whenever you're ready.
So then I was thinking it would be good for us to kind of all talk, because then now we have these two different sides of the story.
Right.
And when we have Linnell saying, first of all, that this father treated her the same. You know what I mean? So we definitely want to kind of hone in on that, because there are several situations where these kids are in these situations and they're not necessarily treated the same.
Right.
But what you're saying is that, but this man is still my father. And so I guess we'll talk more next week to see if you still have a relationship, and if you still have that feeling, because what she's saying here basically on her end is that, hey, we can still maintain the same relationship, right?
Right.
And we can still,
Yeah.
that love
We did.
can still be there.
Yeah, it's still there for me as well.
Great. So let's talk about how you were able to. Was there any point where you needed to forgive somebody, and if so, who that would have been?
So I went through a time where it was a little bit challenging for me, because by the time I found out for sure that, who my father was, my mother had already passed.
Yeah.
So I couldn't talk to her about it. And it was known in my family. My father that raised me knew.
Right.
He knew that. They just chose to raise me as part of the family. Like I was not different than any, that he was my dad. So in my mind, I just felt like doubly blessed, because here I had this man who took care of me, my dad. He took care of me, all the way up through till I was in college. And around that time that my mom died, my father that raised me, right after she died, he got really sick too. And so, and my mother had always been the primary breadwinner in my family. So I knew that was going to drastically change the family situation. But it was very interesting. That's when my biological father really, he kind of stepped up and, was doing a number of things. He paid for my my wedding, and my godmother. They split the cost for my wedding. So that was my biological dad at that time. But, my father that raised me, I just felt like, I had to come to a place where I could make a choice. Like I could be upset because no one really talked to me about it, but it wasn't my father who raised me who was the person I was supposed to be talking to, right? I really needed to hear that from my mom, and I wasn't able to. So I made the choice that I'm going to choose to recognize the fact that I have two men that represented, that were fathers to me, and that loved me and cared for me. But it was a choice.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's probably where we need to kind of hone in for a minute while we have some time left. The choice. And so for that person that is holding on to, well, first of all, your story is a little different, because I think that in most cases you would probably find a child that doesn't feel like they were treated the same.
Right. And what I think is really good about Linnell's story is that it seems like there was communication between the adults, and it seemed like
some boundaries.
Well, an adult decision was made, it seemed like, and it doesn't seem like there was like deception on the part of any one of the adults against the other. Wow. So in a lot of situations, there's deception there, and for instance, the woman may know, right, but she hides this information, and then the father doesn't know, or maybe the father suspects, and that does cause him to feel a certain way, because it's like, whose child is this? What has she been doing? Or that kind of stuff, and that causes him to maybe unknowingly treat the child different, especially if there are other children. Correct. that he is sure is and that can cause. But in this situation, which was really good, is that and of course I'm just speculating, but maybe her mom thought that this was the best situation to do it. Absolutely. This way. Absolutely. And then her dad loved her you know, and that's good too, because she probably was a great child and it was easy for him to love her, and that just makes it easier.
Sure.
You know, and then another great thing is that her biological father, whatever the circumstances was, allowed things to happen. And I think that what made it easier for him was he still was able to have contact with her.
Right.
If he was, and a lot of times women will stop, which is a lot what happened with me, the contact is stopped.
Right.
And then that causes him to be angry.
Right.
And then that can, you know, and especially with all the dynamics that happened in her situation, if somebody was angry, that would just make it that much worse, because then her mom passed. You know what I mean? Imagine if he's angry and there had been no relationship at all. Then she has to try to not only get over the passing of her mom and her father being ill, but then I have to get to know somebody. You know what I mean? It would have been so hard, but because she had that relationship with him, that made it easier. And then him and her mom having a relationship, they were able to kind of pass the baton. So it's really pretty much as good a situation given the circumstances that you can get.
I think you made an excellent point when you said that the adults talked, and there seemed to be a level of respect.
It had to be.
And I mean, when we're talking to people, because we know now that there are people that use kids as pawns, whether they're biological kids or not, they use kids as pawns,
right.
And the kids end up suffering in the end because of this. But you know, when you have adults that are mature and they make decisions and they create boundaries and they stick within those boundaries, then we create a much healthier situation for our children, which ultimately means for our community. Right? Because right now, all the things that we're struggling with in the community and the lack of love, that's really what a lot of it is about. You know, they're missing mom, they're missing dad, they're missing the family unit. So I think if we could really say anything, you know, to people today, it would be to try to come up with some type of a relationship or, you know, boundaries or workable situation and bring these kids together or allow them to have that relationship. Right? Because that is what will be beneficial as we fight mental, mental bondage? So mental bondage is what? Getting caught up in something and you allow it to dictate, you know, it dictates everything in your life.
Yeah.
You know, you get stuck there and you can't function and you can't move forward.
I mean, it's difficult. See, I know me, I'm on the other side of this, and it sounds like Lynell's on the other side of it as well. But I didn't know her then, but I'm sure it was a process for her to get where she is now. Right. And I think that the bondage part bondage is such an extreme word.
She had an opportunity to
for me, I know I was crippled by it. Yeah. Right. You know, and I know that it affected all of my relationships going forward with women, you know what I mean? Not my relationship with the fellas, but I mean with women it affected, and it caused me to not get close to their children because I felt like I had, you know, unresolved stuff with my own, and then I didn't know where it was a lot, and then I felt like how would he feel about me getting close to other, you know, so it was difficult for me for a while, and then ultimately, well, I didn't want children, so that was not something that I wanted anyway.
Because you used to be such a great dad.
Right, but see, my thing, and I think that's true, and I think that I was, but I was looking at it selfishly, like I have stuff on my list I need to do before I have a family. I didn't want any of that because it was going to slow me down. My father always said, look, all the stuff you have on your list, you don't need to have no family, none of that. You need to be focused on the stuff that you're trying to do, because otherwise you're going to have to try to juggle between. Yeah. Absolutely. So I never wanted that. And then when he came, it was like, oh, wow.
Nice surprise.
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to work with this. And then, you know, so then I just fall in love with this boy. It's just like, you know, he's completely dependent on us, me and his mom, and this. You know, so I thought, okay, maybe I can work him into the plan a little bit. Sure. And then so.
Well, kids will steal your heart like
that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of crafted this world for us, and then the rug is real.
So how, we're going to just go into your story now, because you. Yes. So how long? How long?
When I found out,
Yes.
or when I found out, he was 7.
7 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, and so when he found out, he was 11.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you maintained the relationship with him.
because and it's funny. I realized that I looked at it wrong,
Right.
because I thought that I wanted him to be older before he found out.
Okay.
But as I've gotten older, I've realized the older he got, the harder it would
Yeah.
be. And, even at 11, it was hard. Like, he went through a lot.
Right.
It was, acting out and all kind of stuff. So, and I didn't even want to do it then. I wanted to wait till he was even older.
Older. Right.
You know what I mean? And so when my parents, they wanted me to tell him immediately when he was 7. He's 7. He can't.
Right.
I felt like he couldn't understand, but they were right. And I was like, look, this is my thing. I'm doing it the way, and I don't, and if I feel like y'all gonna say something, then y'all can't be around him. You know what I mean? Because I have to do this my way. But I was wrong. And
Yeah, well, it's nothing like the life situation
I was
to help
so
you figure
wrong.
out, you were wrong. Right.
yeah, but so it would have been better at 7, because a lot of memories that I have, he doesn't have these memories because he was a child, like
Okay.
1 or 2. He doesn't remember any of that. So I don't think he really remembers anything past. To me, my earliest memories, I'm probably like 5 or 6, and it's vague stuff. It's not
Yeah,
really
yeah.
like. So he could have handled it better than at 11.
It wouldn't have been
Yeah.
as devastating. So
Right.
were you able to maintain the relationship, or was it one of them scenarios where it just never seemed the same?
Well, I mean, it's not the same, definitely. But there was some years that the communication was cut off, not by my choice.
Right.
But his birth father, biological father, and his mom. He has to get to know a whole new set of people.
Right. So
You
did
know.
he find out around the same time you found out
No.
that it was his, or he knew all along it was his?
His father?
Yeah,
Oh no, his
biological.
father found out when he found out.
Right.
Yeah, so he found out. They both found out at 11.
Okay.
The father had a problem. He had an inkling when he was 7, because when we got the test, it was kind of like, who? If not me, then who?
Right.
And she went through the whole denial thing, and then after we really got to it, she said who.
Who it was.
If it's not you, then it's an ex before me. And but he was not. He was in a marriage at that time,
Okay.
and he wasn't trying to open up. So he was just kind of whatever.
Right.
And I felt like that's when I made the decision to say that I wanted to still stay, because he didn't seem interested in
Right.
finding out. So I felt like, why would we rip up the life that he knows
Absolutely. Right.
for somebody who seemingly doesn't want him? But you fast forward, when he turned 11, his father's situation was different. He wasn't with the mother, and
Yeah, which is
he was
kinda
more
selfish.
open to, okay, now let's find out. And then it is. And then,
Right.
so,
So
yeah.
you wrote a book about it. So, because let's talk about, and we talk a little bit about healing, because the scenario that we're talking about basically is finding out, either the father you thought was the father is not the father, both ends of the spectrum, and the fact that you're saying, Diamond, that it's better probably to tell the kid a little bit earlier. And also talking about a healing process of doing something that's good for the child is to maybe try to come up with some kind of, because it was difficult, I'm sure, it was difficult to be cut off from you, right?
Very much so.
Just like it was difficult for you, it was difficult for the child, right?
Very much so.
And so, since looks like we didn't got the cut side, as we go, I want to talk a little bit about healing. You wrote a book, so was that part of your healing process?
It was. I felt like I felt like I wrote it from the standpoint of I wasn't going to get to speak with him. So I wanted to say everything that I thought. And so looking back, I probably said a little bit more than I should have. And that's why I don't really, it was something that I did for me. I need to get everything out. His mother feels that it was a one-sided
Story. Well, you like Caitlyn
interpretation.
You get her.
What you mean?
Caitlyn Jenner told that one side story.
I'm not like Caitlyn Jenner under no circumstances.
There we go.
Like
we got
Caitlyn
a joke
Jenner.
in there, Miss Nikki. There you go.
Lord.
No, well, basically what I'm saying is that, you know, that whole one-sided feel. But it was
she felt like I just threw out. I don't agree with this because I threw a lot of my personal dirt out. But she felt like I just told this. I didn't get her perspective of the story.
Well, it was your book.
Well, I said that. Yeah,
there you
I
go.
said that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I did that. I wrote things down for me, to help therapy for me.
Absolutely.
It was therapeutic for you. So
Definitely.
journaling and writing is very therapeutic.
Therapeutic, yeah.
I'm having a problem with words.
Yeah,
today.
if you know how to write, it is. If you don't know how to write, it might not be helpful.
It's
But
very therapeutic.
yeah.
So, you know, our goal, and Linnell, when he said that there had to be a process, you know, even losing your mom and not being able to talk to her just to get her, you know, her side of the story, or having an opportunity to say to her, you know, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Were there things that you did to help you with the healing process?
So I think for me, I just, one, you know, I'm a praying person, so that was something that I really felt like it was out of my control. Mm-hmm. So it was, I had to ask God to help me deal with this because there was nothing I could really do with it. Right. I couldn't get my questions answered, and I asked people, like I asked my mom's best friend, and sometimes she would say, "Well, what did your mom tell you?" Right. And because it was her best friend, she wasn't saying it.
Good answer, best friend. She's like, you ain't throwing me under the bus.
All right, well, listen, I don't know if we got to the meat of it. I hope we were able to at least talk a little bit about healing.
Yes.
Because that's what, you know, it's really all about healing. And we started off with the scripture that says, we talked about God as being the ultimate father. So for the person who may be dealing with whatever situation where there's an absence, you know, a father's missing, you don't know who the father is, you don't know where the father is, or you're missing a father. We want everyone to know that God is a healer and God is the ultimate father. For the word says, right, that it was for freedom that Christ set us free. So don't allow yourself to be bound or held captive. You know, this mental bondage thing is the thing that I'm trying to talk about, because you talked about it, Diamond, too, that it prohibited you from being able to probably have get the best out of some relationships in years to come, right? So, you know, we just got to come back because
we can continue this.
We didn't get to the meat and the potatoes of it, and so we know that people are in this scenario and they really need to know a little bit more. I said, poor Linnell, her story's all nice. Everybody was all nice. We need some more down and dirty stuff in it. Love, sex, and lies. You know, because that's what people want to hear. Everybody was so mature in her situation, so we can only hope that it would work out that way for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Closing remarks?
Well, I mean, if you want love, sex, and lies, then I'll go more into my story, and then you can get some of that next time we talk.
All right, closing remarks?
All I would say is that, I mean, I really do feel like I was blessed because I had that love from both of them, but it did take me accepting that.
Accepting the love. There's the other part.
I could not change. The things that I couldn't get answers to. Yeah. I just had to recognize what was the most important in those situations. So I chose those things.
Right. So if you're just tuning in to Connection to Christ, thank you so much for listening today. Our topic of discussion is He's Still My Father. We were talking to my good friend Linnell Medley, who found out when she was in college that her dad was not her biological father, but she was blessed to be able to continue to have a relationship with both of them. And we were talking to my good friend Diamond K, who found out after 7 years that the kid that he thought was his child was not his child. And so hopefully I'll be able to get both of them to come back, because we always want to, you know, some healing, and we want to help some people figure out how to get over, you know, how to get over as in how to get out. Right?
Right.
So thank you guys for listening to Connection to Christ. I'm your host, Rev B, and thank you so much for sharing your story, and hopefully we'll get enough feedback that you guys want to come back and finish up.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for joining, and God bless.